everyone hear me? Yes, that's all right then, isn't it? Now, I'd like to invite everyone to what I believe is the 22nd meeting of the New Right. And just for those newish faces amongst you, I'd like to explain what the New Right is, bearing in mind that there are many, many New Rights all over the world. The New Right was formed 2004-2005. It's essentially a forum for free debate and discussion, particularly about issues that are not discussed or can't be discussed anywhere else. There's a wide variety of speakers have addressed this gathering. Mr. Irving, who will be speaking after me, has addressed it once before. All sorts of other people, an advisor to President Putin of Russia, Alexander Dugin, once addressed us on interesting concepts in relation to the geopolitics of the Russian Federation. We've had some Islamic speakers. We've had dissident speakers of all sorts. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon your view, I've spoken at every one of these gatherings on some metapolitical or cultural matter. The point of the New Right is to support all discourses that portend to inequality. And if the right believes in anything, it believes in the moral goodness of inequality in all forms. And therefore we support discourse that manifests inegalitarianism and inequality. No sectarianism along party allegiances of any sort, within the rightist elements in the Conservative Party and out to as far as you can get, going rightwards and coming back again. We don't permit any of that, and we also request that all speakers are listened to in relative silence, but applause can occasionally break out. Now, the point of the New Right is essentially to focus paradigmatically various inegalitarian ideas of a Mosleyite type, of a pan-European type, of a British nativist type, of a British nationalist type, of a post-fascistic type, of an ultra-nationalist type, of a neo-fascist type, of a revisionist type, and all sorts of other types. We've had pagan speakers, we've had Christian speakers, we've had different orientations. We're not biased about the spiritual system that people choose to adopt or express their European identity through. Now, it could be said that the New Right, unlike the New Right in France, is not a codified intellectual or ideological group like the Benoits. For those who are aware of Grèce and its activities in relation to a righteous response to the leftist events of 1968, which convulsed Europe and France in particular, Grèce came together to form a sort of new hard right ideology growing out of the ultra-right traditions in France that had pre-existed it. Over time, it developed a quite coherent body of theory associated with its leading thinkers like de Benoit and Guillaume Faye. The idea was you either agreed with them or left, and it retained the sectarian, intellectual and ideological profile of much of the French right. Don't forget, the 68 events were influenced by tiny little leftist vanguard groups. Some of them syndicalists, some of them left anarchists, some of them Maoists, some of them splits from the modernist movement of surrealism founded by André Breton earlier in the century. We are a different type of group to that. We don't have a completely coherent line, therefore people are not expelled, there isn't an ideological conformity, there isn't really an editorialism. But what we want over time is to provide that which the universities or the tertiary sector of our educational system will never do. And that is to debate those issues that can be looked at from the right. De Benoit wrote a book called View from the Right, Vue de la Droite, and we wish to view and analyse everything, including the history of the last century, including the Second European Civil War between 1939 and 1945, in a way that would not be permitted in London University, Cambridge University, Glasgow University, Oxford University, or elsewhere. If seminars existed that manifested the sort of views that are expressed here, this group would have no real purpose. But because our tertiary system hounds out any academic who puts forward some of the views contained in these volumes before me on this table, there is a need for a group like this. Now, I'm the chairman of the New Right. This is being filmed. Various people initiated it 3 to 4 years ago. It will have an actual life as all such groups do. When there's nothing more to say, or when larger currents of opinion have taken it up, then it will have served its purpose. I was, for a while, for 4 years, the cultural officer of the British National Party, as is reasonably widely known, which of course has had a breakthrough into the European Parliament, but this is not a group associated with any party or any tendency. And even in relation to that party, I was a bit of an outrider of various sorts, even then. Now, for my speech, I would like to talk about something that has always interested me. The title of the talk is Degrelle, the real Tintin, but what I really want to talk about is the heroic in mass and in popular culture. It's interesting to note that heroic ideas and ideals have been disprivileged by pacifism, by liberalism tending to the left, and by feminism, particularly since the social and cultural revolutions of the 1960s. And yet the heroic, as an imprimatur in Western society, has gone down into the depths, into mass popular culture, often into trashy forms of culture, where the critical insight of various intellectuals doesn't particularly gaze upon it. One of the forms that interests me about the continuation of the heroic in Western life as an idea is the graphic novel, a despised form, particularly in Western Europe, outside France and Italy, and outside Japan, further east. It's regarded as a form primarily for children and for adolescents. And yet, forms such as this, these are 2 volumes of Tintin, which almost everyone has come across in some time or other, 50 languages other than the original French. These books, stroke graphic novels, stroke cartoons, stroke comic books have been translated into. They've sold 200 million copies, which is almost scarcely believable. It basically means sort of a significant proportion of the globe's population has got one of these volumes somewhere. Now, before he died, Degrelle said that the character of Tintin, created by Hergé, was based upon his example. Other people rushed to say that this wasn't true and that this was self-publicity by a notorious man, and so on and so forth. Probably, like all artistic and semi-artistic things, there's an element of truth to it, because a character like this, that's eponymous and archetypal, will be a synthesis of all sorts of things. Hergé got out of these dilemmas by saying it was based upon a member in his family, and so on, and that's probably as true as not. Now, the idea of the masculine and the heroic and the Homeric in modern guise sounds absurd when it's put in tights and appears in a superhero comic and that sort of thing. But the interesting thing is, because these forms of culture are so quote-unquote low, they're off the radar of that which is acceptable, and therefore certain values can come back. It's interesting to note that the pulp novels in America in the 1920s and 30s, which preceded the so-called golden age of comics in the United States in the 30s and 40s, and the silver age in the 1960s, dealt with quite illicit themes. And one of the reasons that even today Tintin is mildly controversial and regarded as politically incorrect in certain circles is they span much of the 20th century. Everyone who's alive now realises that there was a social and cultural revolution in the Western world in the 1960s, where almost all the values of a relatively traditional European society, whatever side it fought on in the Second World War, were overturned and reversed in a mass reversion or re-evaluation of values from a new leftist perspective. Before 1960, many things which are now legal, and so legal that to criticise them has become illegal, were themselves illicit and outside of the pedigree and pattern of Western law, custom, practice and social tradition. We've seen a complete reversal of nearly all of the ideals that prevailed then. This is why many items of quite popular culture are illicit. If one just thinks of a silent film like D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation in 1915, there was a prize awarded by the American Motion Picture Academy up until about 1994 in Griffith's name. For those who don't know, the second part of Birth of a Nation is neo-Confederate in orientation, depicts the Ku Klux Klan as heroic. Heroic! And the Ku Klux Klan regarded as the heroes saving the white South from perdition, from the carpetbaggers, some of whom bear an extraordinary resemblance to the present President of the United States of America. Now,